Welcome to the Poetry Box Live. I'm Shawn Aveningo-Sanders, and I'll be your host for tonight's show. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, my husband Robert and I run a small boutique press here in Portland, Oregon, known as the Poetry Box. We publish about 25 to 30 poetry books per year, plus our annual anthology, The Poeming Pigeon. The Poetry Box Live is our way of supporting our talented authors to help them connect with a broader audience. And as you all know, today is a bit of a somber anniversary for our country. And when I realized that our second Saturday series was going to fall on the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, I considered canceling the September show. But then I remembered the resilience and strength that echoed through our land 20 years ago, as we all refused to let this tragic day define us as individuals and as a nation. So in that light, we will continue to celebrate the things in our life that keep us propelling forward. And with that said, I am very excited today to present three wonderful poets for you. We have Elizabeth McBride reading from Michigan, Susan Coultrap-McQuin joining us from Minnesota, and Marcia Loughran from New York City. So let's get started with our first featured reader, Elizabeth McBride, author of Most Beautiful, which is not only a book of poetry, but also contains gorgeous paintings by Connie Cronenwet. Elizabeth's poetry is often an experience of walking into this world as a careful and curious observer, the natural result of her reverence for the wonders of creation and those with whom it is shared. Her poetry has appeared in journals and publications such as Dunes Review, Louisiana Literature, Red River Review, Scintilla, and Peninsula Poets. She is a fellow of the National Writers Project's Red Cedar Writing Project, an affiliate of the Amherst Writers and Artists, and a recipient of the Glen Arbor Artist in Residence Program. Please welcome Elizabeth McBride.
Thank you, Shawn. I am honored to be here and to share this time with all of you. In 2011, the television show Good Morning America held a competition for the most beautiful place in America, and viewers selected the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore with its 65 miles of shoreline views of Lake Michigan, its tall dunes, scenic drives, forests, rivers, lakes, the neighboring Manitou Islands, and the quaint villages of Glen Arbor, Empire, Glen Haven, and the Port Oneida Historic District. Over 11,800 years ago, an ice sheet more than 1,200 feet thick covered the area and carved the land, depositing rock and sand and soil in its wake. And along the shoreline, sand dunes formed on top of the mounded glacial moraines, resulting in what are called perched dunes. Some are over 400 feet above lake level. This is a place permeated with history, yet it is always becoming new. Most Beautiful is a collection of poetry and prose essays written during an artist residency that I was given by the Glen Arbor Art Center in 2013. Each of the entries in the book are identified by the place that inspired the writing, thus it can be used as an accompaniment for exploring the area or as a souvenir filled with reminders of what one has seen there. In addition to the writing, Most Beautiful is filled with the amazing artwork of fellow artist in residence, Connie Cronenwet. Her reflections of the mood, spirit, and scenery of the area grace the cover and each spread of the book, adding a great deal to the reading experience. Her work can also be seen at the WSG Gallery in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Many, many thanks to the Glen Arbor Art Center from both Connie and me. And this is the cover that you can see that Connie did. And now this poem is both my first question, having never seen the area before I came to the residency. It's also its answer as I explored what made this place the most beautiful place in America. And it is called Most Beautiful. Is it in omniscient views that part the curtains of horizon, in the sculpted regal mounds of lifted history at your feet? Is it in the majesty of lofty shaded leafy awnings, in clear streams that churr with hurry to join waves and break on shore? Is it in the twig that holds the lilac panicle aloft, the brush of sunlight on the hilltop skimmed with green as morning comes? Or can it be in arched dried canes, in wisps of disappearing clouds, in the slit of sunset fading, corals fossilized to stone? Can it be in billowed grasses, seagull footprints at the shoreline, lichen-covered curls of birch bark, dewdrops caught in fallen leaves? Is it in the full wild silence of the woods when, clothed in stillness, self recedes and joins the trees in their hallowed repose? Wherever there is wonder, there beauty waits to be discovered, speaking first from deep within, teaching us to see. And when I came to Glen Arbor to the artist residency, it was shortly before the town was opening for the tourist season. So I was finding this amazing and overwhelming stillness there. It was just beautiful. And this next piece is a prose piece. It is entitled More Than What You See. They're just an attempt. The paths and trails, drives, overlooks, and roadside stops, just an attempt to let you guzzle, sip, and swallow the magnitude of Sleeping Bear Dunes. You can't. Perhaps you could garner an impression of their height by a climb to the top and a view of the sheer drop to the distant turquoise shoreline far below. Or maybe, if you donned a backpack, armed yourself with water and sunscreen, and set out to hike to find their distance, you'd discover the wonder of their scope. Yet, among the disorienting mounds and hills and troughs that appear between trail markers and amidst the neat progression of plant life that signals distance from the shore, the challenges of marking paths on moving landforms becomes apparent. And every time you return to discover this wondrous place again, you would find your paths slightly changed. The dunes don't sleep. From savage storms that rearrange the terrain within hours to trickles of sand grains that tumble when a seagull lands and stretches its wings, this is a landscape in constant motion. The perpetual updraft off the lake skims the sand and drops its cargo back behind the newest crest, maintaining the slow transplant of the surface in an ever-spreading sheen, feeding the Great Bear as it lumbers inland, inch by inch over the years. Still, the majesty extends beyond the visible, for when upon the tallest dune you conjure the image of the massive glacier that gave birth to this formation, carved the Great Lakes, ground massive boulders into powder, and dispensed rock and soil and water in its mounded seeping wake, the big you see that writhes around the edges of landlocked perception pales in contrast to the big that left it here, where you are standing with its sand in your shoes. And the next is a poem called At the Top, 450 feet above lake level. Bounding from lake level into the sky, it is the punctuation of a run-on land-bound sentence stretching far across the Mitten State. Despite the heat and sand and haul, the panting, pulling, leaning forward, all is forgotten when sky and water merge in a brilliant panorama. Now you stand on a seabed rolled and blown into a towering mound. You're breathing in the rush, the updraft, reveling in the dazzling light, the million scintillant ways of blue. And along the shoreline in the spring, the temperatures change quickly and they can create very heavy fog. This next prose piece comes from an early morning solo exploration that I was doing of the U.S. Life-Saving Station site and a wonderful chance encounter with the preservationist William Love and his crew as they prepared the facilities for the oncoming season and for all of those who want to know history and not its adaptation. And this is called On the Roof of the Life-Saving Station Boathouse. The Preservationist Speaks. From here, I can usually see both the Manitous, the sandy crescents of their smiles pale in the early morning light, hand-split shingles in my left hand, hammer in the right. I pause and peer into the layered blanket of fog that shrouds the waterway and the islands. 16 more wedge-shaped cedar pieces will complete the witch's hat that sits atop the boathouse here at the old life-saving station. Each shingle's measured, cut, and painted before it's carried up to be installed. You only have one chance to do it right, I've told my crew. From here on out, your work will be repeated as the authentic way things were done. This same shade of red has always been used to keep the station visible from far offshore. On these whispery pre-spring days, when I'm up here mending the roof, I think of the fogs and the storms it's seen and the lives lost in these changing waters. This station is a place that knew hard work, but rang with the laughter and friendship of the crew that lived and worked here and the officers' families that lived here too. And this is a place that knew the lake's terror, the sound of groaning wheels moving lifeboats forward on the iron rails, the crash and thunder of breaking waves, the heavy wooden doors of the boathouse thumping in the gale force winds, and the loudest silence known to man, the overwhelming hollow of a rescue defeated. Years ago, the drip line around the officer's house was completely set with colored lake stones. Each stone stands up on its end, a small memorial to the hands that plucked it from this northern sea. Who would have placed them there, I wonder? That story still wants to be told. There are so many stories here, and every day I work to keep the touchstones of those stories true. This roof is closer to the wildness of this place than the land below, where paved sidewalks and tiled markers guide both footsteps and perspectives. The sky and surf are always changing, yet in some ways they stay the same. Voices of the distance mingle with the calls of gulls. The lonely foghorn groans and signals on this nearly sightless day, and vigilance is preserved. And the Pierce Stocking Scenic Drive is a wonderful part of the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. Each stop along the drive is named and numbered, and many have a wooden viewing platform that will allow visitors uninterrupted views. One such place is called Scenic Overlook 11, where I, like so many others before me, leaned out over the wooden railing to take in the scenery below. I really am a leaner when it comes to looking for things, and it was a wide rail, which, as you will see, is important in this poem. It's called North Bar Lake Overlook and Picnic Area. Held aloft over the treetops on a wood-railed precipice viewing forest, hills, horizon, you look toward the writhing blue. Thunderous waves and rearing whitecaps charge the full length of the shoreline, endless dance of light and contrast beyond early leaves unfurled. Spring has brought its best fresh green, an overlay for winter's cedar, blue-gray spruce and ragged jack pine, frothed with luminous new growth. Evening sun lights distant sand dunes, brushing arching seagrass golden, lights the undersides of leaves, and sighing, you look down to see that you are standing in the place where Nate and Rach, Alex and Laura, Mommy and Daddy Johnson, 07, Susie, Kay, Justin and Sarah, among yet 100 others, have each paused to capture grandeur here at Overlook 11, and not knowing what to do, to take it in, preserve the wonder and hold and own it any longer than it takes to turn away, they simply left their names behind. And last from this collection, we travel in a scale from the majestic to the small miracles beside us in a lovely moment of noticing the light. It is called Waterfall of Light. Crystal River ripples, flows, and turns beneath bowed evergreens. Reflections light the undersides of every branch and trace their brindled, rugged trunks with cascades of illusioned rain. Jack pines hang their draping boughs over the water, fingers trailing, like the paddler who floats slow and mesmerized by motion, stillness, becomes both at once. And I have a few short pieces from outside of the collection. The first is entitled Time. What is there to write about except your ways of passing, seizing, wringing from us what we love while we grasp for wisps of hope? Always in our poems of living, water flows and breath exchanges, sunrise glows and sunset darkens, leaves turn, fall, and then decay. Root of impermanence, you remain, shifting your feet and changing seasons, winding clocks while erasing moments in the vacuum of your dance, grasping yet another dancer, always as you circle round, even as I walk these lines. And as we head into obscurity, this one is called Inexplicable Things. The inexplicable, when explained, sounds trite and small, reduced to words and subject to the confines of our verbal ideation. Translated into ciphered sound, great mystery implies a game with clues and spaces, moves and ruse, and a plausible solution. Birth and death, two 5-letter words that should begin, not end the same, each conclude in a soft breath. The ineffable is. And this last poem is short, but it is also large. In the wake of the terror and loss of 9/11, of our years of war, our attempts at peace, and the many lives changed or lost due to those efforts, and the losses and regrets and fears surrounding COVID, and even the many opinions that we let divide us, I offer this poem, and I ask that we pause, and before we react to things we see or hear, that we give each other the grace of listening, the grace of supposing that we might not know another person's story. We might not know their pain. It is titled Half Moon. Isn't it like us to name something only for the part that we can see? Its fullness is flattened to partial reflection of light from beyond our view. But that light knows the rounded whole we miss with our darting shadowed eyes. Half moon. Lacking. Not quite right. Naive. Broken. unrefined. In our blindness, we assume that we know the whole. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Outstanding. That was really, really wonderful. And I'm a little overwhelmed. That last poem really got me, and it kind of makes me think of how I quickly judge sometimes. So thank you for that. Beth, I haven't been to Glen Harbor, but your poems, along with Connie's paintings in this book, have
It's amazing.
made me add it to, it's on my bucket list now. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Oh.
I love how you've incorporated the history of the area along with its beauty and with your wonderful sense of wonder. So I really appreciate you sharing your world with us today. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I owe a great deal to all of the very patient people that were on task there in all the museums and displays, because I had so many questions, but it was a wonderful experience, and they are wonderful hosts too. So I would encourage you to visit, definitely. Thank you.
You bet. Our next featured poet is Susan Coultrap-McQuin, author of What We Bring Home. Susan loves the challenge of writing poems that invite readers to see the world in new ways, from the smallest leaf to the largest cities. Her poems have appeared in journals such as Talking Stick, The Moccasin, Songs of Eret's Poetry Review, and in several recent pandemic anthologies. She has also exhibited poems in libraries, art galleries, and parks in Minnesota, where she now lives. What We Bring Home is her first chapbook. Please welcome Susan Coultrap-McQuin.
Thank you, Shawn. Thank you very much for your introduction, for hosting this reading this evening, and for being the most fabulous publishers I could imagine working with. Thank you very much. And I want to take a moment to thank the audience that's here this evening. I see so many familiar faces, family and friends. It's deeply touching. Thank you very much. And Beth, your reading was wonderful. We share many similar themes, so you listen for them. My chapbook, What We Bring Home, is a collection of poems written as I puzzled over what it means to be who I am, moving through the world at my particular time in history, having grown up as an American, and a privileged one at that. My poems are responses to some of my experiences as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Philippines at the time of the Vietnam War, and more recent poems that respond to travel experiences that I've had in Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam. Among my poems are several that relate to the impact and aftermath of war in the countries of Southeast Asia. I've chosen to read some of those poems tonight because it is September 11th, and we have come to the end of the wars in the Middle East that resulted from that horrific event. In the next decades, we'll be learning more about the aftermath of those wars, not only on the soldiers who served in them, but also on the civilians on both sides. What will we remember? What will we forget? What will we never know? I have no predictions. I only have observations, my souvenirs of what I've seen and felt. The first poem I will read was inspired by the situation of snorkeling over the remnants of a World War II landing craft in the waters off my island in the Philippines. Americans and allies landed on that beach to liberate the Philippines. Almost forgotten, San Jose, Mindoro, Philippines. Heavy boots once stomped this beach, swirling sand as they jumped ashore, left behind this landing craft, a skeleton of our fathers' war. Around the watery gravesite, small caretakers, pink and yellow, swim over and through their charge, tending to its gaping holes. We snorkel above the wreck, watch a crab drag sand that slowly buries the rusting hulk, makes this a playground again. Its details distorted by waves, we conjure galleon treasures instead of the pains of liberators coming to save tortured shores. Floating above the relic, detached, we cannot know its true shape, its full heft hidden in shadows, a requiem of hush, its fate. It was the war in Vietnam that shaped my generation, and its impact was not limited to soldiers. Many others were swept up in a war we call the Vietnam War, and the other side calls the American War. War correspondents, for example, braved the danger of a war zone and were heroes in trying to bring us the news. The next poem was written after a visit to one of those Vietnam War correspondents' old haunts, and it's entitled "At the Foreign Correspondents Club, Phnom Penh, Cambodia." Following their footsteps, we climb high above the riverside road, hot, tired, like those who met here, reporters of danger and death, envied in our youth. Their ghosts lean at the bar, sip whiskey and smoke, eat fish and rice, half listening to folk songs from home, bragging of hostile fire skirted in the streets. We struggle to sense them, order our wine, text home, eat fish and rice, hum along to their old songs, comparing souvenirs and tourist sites. On the walls, their photos hang, fighters wading in rice fields, soldiers shuffling city rubble, a girl screaming as she flees, fading reminders of foreign news. Outside, a motorcycle backfires, cracks like gunfire in the night. Ghosts seek cover. We pay our price. Dodge speeding traffic, still trailing our heroes down neon lit streets. The situation of the next poem was being invited into the home of a Vietnamese man who had fought with Americans in the war. Note that Saigon was the name of the city before the war, and Ho Chi Minh is its name now. Saigon man in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. An old man welcomes us, Americans, to his home. His wide gums and teeth remind me of faces in newspapers long ago. He speaks of the war, his American friends, does not mention the end, his prison time, the death of his wife, no hopes of a government job. Travelers from America, we listen to his gratitude in sadness, confusion, or relief. I warm to his words, but remember my protests in my own Iowa streets. I hear his truth, but I don't confess when he pours fine whiskey as he would for best friends. He raises his glass to Americans in his home. For your support of my country, I loved and lost. Let us drink. In Vietnam, our group also visited the tunnels through which supporters of North Vietnam and Ho Chi Minh infiltrated Saigon to fight the South Vietnamese and Americans. It is now a national history park in Vietnam, celebrating the success of the Viet Cong, the VC, over the government of South Vietnam and the Americans. It's entitled Americans in Chu Chi Tunnels, Historical Site, Vietnam. We rustle through dry leaves, twist and turn to drop underground, duck walk through long VC tunnels, dank from the jungle above, crouch in 3-foot spaces, our minutes to their hours in this maze. We emerge in a surgery room where they used coconut juice in IVs. We hunch over once more, crawl to the command post where wax spiders surround fading maps, plan their next stealth attack. Hidden from Agent Orange, napalm bombs, they wait for the cover of night. Our guide, a grandparent like us, describes his youth in these tunnels. Not much to eat or drink, says he wishes enemies shared beers, not bombs. His job, a reward for shooting the enemy tank that blew off his arm. We depart through a gift shop empty, take no souvenirs from this labyrinth of war. The Mekong Delta is a fertile agricultural region in the south of Vietnam. It was one of the sites of the Tet Offensive and many casualties during the Vietnam War. This poem was written after a visit there. It's entitled 50 Years, Mekong Delta, Vietnam. I know this fertile delta once shuddered under bombs, turned gray with smoke. Too many people lost homes and lands, ancestors' graves, family members, friends. Yet villages now thrive. Fishing boats and cruise ships ply former routes of war. I sit with old enemies to sample food in their homes, laugh as if there was no war. Tomorrow, they'll plow fields where shrapnel still hides, gray danger beneath the green. Next, I'd like to read a poem that opens a wider lens on my theme. It's entitled Of Armies and Art. These two sides of our world always seem to tug at our souls for prominence, armies and art. This poem was inspired by two temples I visited in Cambodia, the famous Angkor Wat, with its carved walls celebrating military victory and a king's rule, and the lesser known Bantai Shri Temple that celebrates a more spiritual artistic life. Of Armies and Art, Siem Reap, Cambodia. 1. Emperor of Temples, the famed Angkor Wat, proud as a mountain, rules a thick, hot jungle on shoulders of dark stone. It proclaims its domain in bas-relief of men and gods, led by a king who reigned with power and fear, built a monument to himself. 2. The Citadel of Beauty, Bantai Shri sings with grace, tucked in an afternoon light. No boastful crowd disrupts the peace of dancing gods on chiseled walls and swirls of garland blooms for spirits of the Hindu way. Here, dreams are etched in sandstone. Poems are filled with praise. The final poem I'd like to read this evening is the last poem in my chapbook. In it, I refer to a woven basket that I brought home as a souvenir from Laos, a country that is still full of unexploded bombs left behind by the war in Vietnam. When I lifted its lid one day, I caught the scent of smoke, and that inspired this last poem. Mysteries in What We Bring Home, Victoria, Minnesota. The scent of smoke drifts from the lid of a basket, small replica of one I used when rising with roosters. I offered cooked rice to saffron-robed monks. The smell tells of all I still do not know beyond my own campfires, scary stories in dark woods, imaginary frights, ghosts of my privileged life. I can only guess if this is from a blacksmith's fire, wood-fed stove, or funeral pyre, lit when someone tripped on a leftover bomb of the American War. Someone's story lingers in this simple souvenir, elusive as smoke disappears. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Oh, that was so moving. You know, I really love how these poems, they invite us to be travelers, but they also show us the value of being more than a tourist. The joy of visiting a foreign land, meeting the people, hearing the stories, and experiencing life on their terms, not ours. And I think this book celebrates that authentic sense of connection in a really beautiful way. So thank you. Thank you for writing this. Our final feature tonight is Marcia B. Loughran, author of Songs from the Back in the Back. Marcia received an MFA in creative writing from the Bennington Writing Seminars in 2013. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Verdad, Spoon River Poetry Review, and elsewhere. Marcia's written 2 award-winning chapbooks, Still Life with Weather and My Mother Never Died Before and Other Poems, which won the 2nd place in our 2020 Poetry Box Chapbook Contest. Marcia reads for her work in bars, bookstores, and black box theaters in New York City and the Catskills. She is a nurse practitioner and proud resident of Queens, New York. Please welcome Marcia Loughran.
My husband is applauding. Thank you, Shawn. This is called Take Two. When I die, I'm going to the movies. I'll sink back, fake red velvet, the encompassing comfort of armrests. My feet don't touch the floor. My father settles in beside me. Names float upwards on the screen in curlicue fonts. We call them out like old friends. Big-chested music swells the dark. Our faces in the flickering light. Our fish looking through water at the sun. Classic movies, the only time my father stopped telling stories. He let Ginger and Fred, Bogey and Betty take center stage for a couple of black and white hours. When the dame was got and the last song sung, dance tunes played us up the aisle. We stayed quiet, stretching the feeling into the elevator, resurfacing slowly, eyes adjusting to the pockmarked walls of the parking garage. Starting the car, my father would launch into a memory. The first time he saw the movie, maybe. Scrap metal matinees on Saturday afternoons at the Mount Lookout Theater. During the war, they collected wagonfuls of cans to throw into a big truck and get in for free. Double feature, a Western followed by Abbott and Costello. The whole ride home, we get to be there too. 1940s Cincinnati, a Dolce Vita. My father, our Fellini. This is a poem from my upcoming chapbook. Thank you, Shawn. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, my fellow readers, Beth and Susan. I'm ordering your books right now. I'm so excited. Such a great audience. We've got people from Ireland, Wellfleet, Vermont. It's bananas. So thank you. The next poem is a golf poem, which is actually a, sort of a contradiction in terms, but anyway, it's a golf poem. Deal with it. 13th hole. My father and I play golf quietly. I walk, he rides. We meet to look for lost balls, whispering like librarians, conspirators, murmuring encouragement or sympathy. It's a hot day. The gravel cart path meanders like a river. At the bend, a fox sits upright, sentry. In the ferns behind the tee box, reddish-brown rustle, second fox. I hit first. Flashes of fur dodge along the edge of the woods, following the ball. Halfway down the fairway, the foxes form a gallery and watch our second shots. My father's errant drive bounces on the verge beside them. The closest fox picks the ball up in his mouth, trots back onto the fairway and drops it, improving the lie. I hear my father laugh out loud. Pleased, the foxes twirl in and out of a sand trap, leap, bounce onto the green, and disappear. Our next shots fly straight, sharp, light. I've sent it into golf magazines and nobody ever took it. It's crazy. I don't know why. So yeah, the book is basically half of it is poems from my father, who's on. So wave. Everybody wave to my father. He's in the attractive Irish sweater. You can also wave if you can find somebody with a fire on in the background. That's Ireland. We have Ireland on board. Loch Melvin in some county in Ireland is on board. So wave to them. We have the sweater and we have the people. This is called On the Road to the Thousand Islands, and it's kind of the title poem, although not really. I remember humming in a nest of sleeping bags in the back of my grandparents' station wagon. This was 1976. Seatbelts were for space travel, when I was interrupted by a jolt. And I was looking up at my sister's face instead of at the back of her head. I'd landed on the floor at her feet, behind the driver's seat. Space travel. There weren't enough ambulances, so we had to share with the lady that hit us, who was about to get married and had run a stop sign. When she stepped into the ambulance and saw 3 children staring, curious, she let out a wail and cried all the way to the emergency room, where my grandparents had already been taken after smashing 2 solar explosions into the windshield. They had to have stitches in their faces. The scariest part was the endless sobbing of the woman as the ambulance rocked and swayed and the sirens sang. I didn't understand. I didn't know the sting of could have beens, the wounding power of what if. This was back when everything was concrete as a tiny island clinic, regular as a quiet crossroads, and time just something to hum to. So I'm kind of copying Beth because I have a beach poem, but it's Cape Cod, it's not Lake Michigan, so hopefully it's okay. It's called The Crossing. One thing about taking these long car rides with family is that sometimes you get there and the place is full of cousins, which is really nice because cousins are actually better than siblings and more, they have to be nice to you, unlike other kids. Anyway, so this is for all the cousins who just got together in Cape Cod with our family, multiple generation, and they're all back home again, but this is for them. It's from my first chapbook, Still Life with Weather. The Crossing. Everyone take a sip. Calm down. The Crossing. To toughen the soles of our feet for long summers, we walk barefoot on tarry asphalt. Hot, 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 hot. We reach the cove, buggy, calm, held in Great Island's arm, our sky boundary. We slipper kick into our flip-flop, smack, smack, smack down the long wooden staircase, which clings to the side of the bluff, a tinker toy, the rigging of our pirate ship. At high tide, we sit at the top of the seawall, dangling feet. The dog sea loves these rocks, rolls over and back, a lick, a lap. At low tide, we jump off the wall into wet sand, scurrying hermit crabs out of our sudden footprints. Twice a day, this bay empties, Red Sea parting, for fishermen to drive out in their rattle trucks and check the oyster racks. Shoeless beware, razor clams, mussel shells, occasional jellies. We must step softly like fish. By summer's end, we will tiptoe our way across the bottom of the sea, past the mud trails, beyond the white buoy to Great Island. And the treasure? To turn, scratched, bug-bitten, footsore, and see ourselves from far away, from over there. We have 2 people from Wellfleet, wave. People from Wellfleet, wave. They're there. Okay. This is a mini essay, which is the last piece. It's slightly longer and it's prose poem, but it's fine. It's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. Other people did prose, so it's going to be okay. But I do occasionally, when I can't write poems and everything is kind of stuck, I will often come up with one of these, and I call them messays. This is called Taxis for Peace. I have a theory that as long as New York City cabbies drive on the streets of Manhattan day and night without killing each other, we have a chance at world peace. Growing up, I knew a girl whose grandmother swore there would never be a nuclear apocalypse because of the New Jersey Turnpike. As long as we all keep driving on the New Jersey Turnpike without killing each other, we have a chance. I was explaining this theory to my Bulgarian taxi driver the other night after a couple of glasses of wine, and he seemed to agree with me, although maybe he was just being polite. His English was good, but his accent was heavy. Remind me where Bulgaria is, I asked. Eastern border with Russia, western border with Greece, north of Turkey, south of Siberia. Siberia? I'm no geographer, but that seems, no, Serbia. Bulgaria is south of Serbia. I said sympathetically, do you have a dictator in Bulgaria? He laughed. No, we have democratic government. It was communist, and now it is democratic government. I persisted. Yes, but is it the same prime minister for years and years and years? Nope. We have elections, we have presidents, we have different prime ministers. Only problem is migrants. Bulgaria is gateway to Europe. The taxi driver knew how to get to my neighborhood in Queens because he is my neighbor. He lives 3 subway stops from me. A lot of taxi drivers live or used to live in my neighborhood. They relax a little when I tell them my address because they're driving us both home. They know to take the upper level of the 59th Street Bridge, turn right at the Titty Bar on 21st Street. We talked about the neighborhood, about the difficulty parking Monday through Friday because of the stupid commuters from Long Island. He gave up his car, only the taxi now. His family rents a car when they go to Cape Cod. Cape Cod? Yes, Cape Cod. Many Bulgarians live on Cape Cod. There is a well-established Bulgarian enclave on Nantucket. He loves Nantucket and much prefers it to Martha's Vineyard. He drives his family to Cape Cod every year, just like my family drove to Cape Cod every year, my whole life, watching for troopers in Connecticut, no rest stops in Rhode Island, staring out the window at boring Southern Mass. We argued about how long it takes from New York. He goes 70 the whole way and makes it in 4 hours. He arrived at my house in Queens in 20 minutes. I overtipped and got out. I will never see him again, but next week, after a few glasses of wine, I will meet someone from somewhere else, someone who might want to talk after a long day making a buck in America, who might relax into the dark as we sail over the bridge, the Empire State blinking behind us. Someone who might glance sideways through the bulletproof glass and tell me a little bit about the world we both live in. Thank you so much.
Oh my God, Marcia. Marcia. I always wanted to say that to a real person.
Oh, we've been saying that her whole life.
I'm sure. But oh my God, I mean, you've taken us from Abbott and Costello to the back of a station wagon. You've taught us how we're going to be okay as long as people are still driving on the turnpike. And we've learned all about Bulgaria. So I'm like, wow, what a trip. This book is so much fun, and I can't thank you enough for letting us publish it. It's fantastic. And so, and your reading of these poems is just always such a joy. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So I want to thank all of our fantastic poets tonight, and thank you, our audience, for joining us for another edition of the Poetry Box Live. You know, as poets and authors have been impacted by the closures of bookstores and all of our favorite coffee shops, it means the world that you have joined us here on Zoom to celebrate their poetry. Next month, our show will be on Saturday, October 9th at 4 p.m. Pacific, and we will be celebrating the launch of The Poeming Pigeon, From Pandemic to Protest, and we'll have about 30 poets from all over the globe reading their work from that new anthology. So if you want to keep up to date on upcoming shows, new releases, and submission opportunities, please subscribe to our newsletter by going to thepoetrybox.com, where you'll find a sign-up form at the bottom of each webpage. And speaking of submission opportunities, we will be open for submissions of poetry and artwork for our next Poeming Pigeon beginning this Wednesday, September 15th through the end of October. And I'll put that link for the information in the chat room. Thank you again for joining us today. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. We'll see you next month. Everybody, feel free to unmute yourself and chat with the poets and ask questions. Thank you.
Turnout. I keep going through. There are all the different people from all the different places. Bananas.
This has been great.
Yes.
This is awesome. Yeah.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was
Thank you for-
wonderful.
Thank you for coming.